So how do we know if our gut is not as healthy as it should be? How do we even begin to say, oh, check my gut?
So your thyroid, adrenals, connection after connection.
Yeah.
That all starts in the gut. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably 9.5 out of 10 Americans have an unhealthy gut. The symptoms are innumerable, really.
We're back in part 2 with a deeper discussion on the microbiome. And I'm with Dr. Hillary Hunt, who is MedPeds and sees adults and children alike at ZupMed. And we were just talking about the microbiome being related to mental health. And we were saying that there's a gut-brain connection. But there's also the gut-immune connection. And there may be even more.
The gut hormone connection.
Mm-hmm.
So your thyroid, adrenals, autoimmune disorders. So when we talk about the immune system, not just the health response to infections or prevention of infections, but also dysregulation that results in autoimmunity, meaning attacking of organs. Many people are probably familiar with type 1 diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis, also allergic diseases. Mm-hmm. So there's just connection after connection.
Yeah.
That all starts in the gut.
Yeah. So how do we know if our gut is not as healthy as it should be? How do we even begin to say, oh, check my gut?
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably 9.5 out of 10 Americans have an unhealthy gut. Mm-hmm. And the symptoms are innumerable, really. It could be anything from depression and fatigue to joint pain, joint swelling, thyroid imbalance, frequent respiratory infections, allergic disease.
Skin,
it's just
eczema,
rashes, eczema, all over the map. To declare, specifically what your microbiome looks like, we have
the genetic test, the stool test.
Right, that is so valuable. Mm-hmm. But the genetic testing provides us a lot of information so we can very specifically target the gut. But even when we're unable to do that, we can target the gut more broadly based on whichever system is misbehaving, basically, and looking into that.
Yeah, that's so amazing to me that we're at a point where we can take an external symptom that modern medicine might just say, okay, there's a medication as a Band-Aid to take care of that. But how interesting would it be to go after the root, the gut, and restore health there and have less side effects and no longer need a medication? That's hopefully where we want the science to go in the future.
Right. And hopefully more and more of the medical field will embrace, I think, that approach. But it does take time, and it takes a willingness to be interested in this area that's not as well-defined and which has been just a real absence of information and teaching. We mentioned before that you really don't get this in medical school. Mm-hmm. I think I first became interested probably maybe 10 years ago or so. I can't remember exactly, but when I read an article about children with autism whose symptoms improved after a fecal transplant. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed and hooked immediately. If that can happen, then there's a huge relationship.
Sure. Well, the fecal transplant has also been studied in obesity, which is very interesting. Like you have an obese, and there are human examples, but the original studies were done in mice where you had an obese mouse and a thin mouse, and the transplant worked both ways. So if they transplanted the small mouse with the microbiome or the gut bacteria from the obese mouse, that small mouse gained weight. And vice versa, the obese mouse with the transplant from the smaller one lost weight. And so, at ZUP, we do a lot of cardiometabolic, and we're assessing weight, and we're trying to get people to a weight loss goal. And that is why we're so focused on a certain probiotic strain or strains to help metabolism because of that gut metabolism link.
And how interesting, because most people probably think there's it's mostly genetics, right? It's mostly genetics that makes me be fat or thin.
And
what are my parents?
Yeah.
But the environment is not just what you eat, but what you're exposed to, and therefore the microbiome.
Yeah.
Because if you share an environment and you share behaviors, you also likely share similarities in your microbiome.
Yeah.
Independent of what's there as a genetic predisposition.
Sure, absolutely. And, how we're families, you're born, and it makes a difference if you were a cesarean birth versus a vaginal birth, what you were exposed to. It makes a difference if you were given multiple rounds of antibiotics as a child. I think there was a recent study that was a Finnish study that was an observational study that said that if a child got antibiotics within the first 2 years of his life, his or her life, that the increase in mental health disorders, including anxiety, depression, ADHD, was 50% greater. This is from a disruption in gut bacteria that could be protective of us.
There was another study that showed that children who got antibiotics or antacids before 6 months of life had a 4-time greater incidence of allergies, asthma, and eczema by the age of 4.
What is going on?
It's amazing. And another reason I find this fascinating is because we have been trained to want antibiotics. And patients come in and they want the antibiotic right away because they feel that they're going to get better faster. And understandable, we've got quick, fast-paced lives. We don't have time to be sick. But not only does the antibiotic cause all this disruption, but the healthier gut reduces the need for antibiotics. So there are the other studies, again, so many studies, showing that fewer upper respiratory infections when you had a more diverse microbiome, less. I believe one had less fever and flu in the winter with a more diverse microbiome.
Or recovery.
Faster recovery. And we saw this in COVID, the COVID-19 MISC in children, which was the severe illness, landed kids in hospitals, very sepsis-like picture, and alarming considering initially kids weren't felt to be as adversely affected. There was also that microbiome. So the more dysbiosis or dysregulated, poorly diverse, or wrong types of bacteria, or not enough of the good bacteria that they had, the more that was associated with a higher risk of the MISC.
When we used to be hunters and gatherers, the gut microbiome was populated probably with 350 different species. And, we share patients that have a diversity that's less than 100. And that's why we're sick. That's why we want to help and to start with a gut restoration. And that's something that I believe is going to be very prominent in future medicine.
I think most patients would benefit from that because, like I said, I think that to have a diverse microbiome in a normal American life takes actual work.
Yeah.
And most of us, and many people just aren't aware of the importance.
Yeah, it's not just taking a probiotic. However, that is very key in the beginning when we learn the results from testing to pick certain key strains that are missing. But really, it's eating the rainbow and living well and sleeping well and exercising well.
Movement, nutrition. The stress management, even sleeping in darkness.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's all anti our normal everyday lives.
Yeah.
So
welcome to 2024.
Right.
So if someone, even outside of a kid, but if an adult, wanted to do a deeper dive on their microbiome, how can they schedule a visit?
They are welcome to call us at 901-701-7010 or to go onto our website, www.zoopmed.com, and they can schedule with me or
with our pharmacy team too. We can take care of the testing, and then our physician team can oversee the treatment as well. So thanks so much for joining us today, and I look forward to future conversations with you, Dr. Hunt.
Thank you.
You're welcome.